There's a moment in every person's life when they look in the mirror and feel like they're staring at a stranger. The face is familiar, but the soul behind it feels distant, fragmented, lost. You recognize the features, but you can't quite remember who you used to be before life taught you to wear masks, before society convinced you to abandon your authentic voice, before you learned that being yourself wasn't safe enough. This disconnection from our true self isn't just a modern phenomenon. It's a fundamental human struggle that Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung dedicated his entire life to understanding. Jung discovered that we don't just lose touch with who we are, we actually split ourselves into pieces, creating what he called different aspects of the psyche. But here's what most people don't realize. This fragmentation isn't permanent. There's a way back to wholeness, a path that leads not just to healing, but to a profound transformation that changes everything about how you experience life. What you're about to discover isn't just psychological theory, it's a roadmap that has guided thousands of people back to their authentic selves, back to a place where they no longer need external validation to feel complete, where they can finally stop performing and start living. This is Jung's most transformational truth, and by the end of this exploration, you'll understand exactly how to apply it in your own journey toward healing and self-discovery. The truth is, most of us are living fragmented lives without even knowing it. We've become so accustomed to wearing different personas for different situations that we've forgotten there was ever an original self underneath it all. But that original self, it's still there, waiting to be remembered, waiting to be integrated, waiting to transform your entire existence. If you've ever felt like you're living someone else's life, if you've ever wondered why success doesn't bring the satisfaction you expected, if you've been searching for something you can't quite name, then what you're about to learn will fundamentally shift how you see yourself and your potential for healing. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and survival mechanisms. Jung understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to grasp. True healing doesn't come from fixing what's broken. It comes from remembering what was never actually lost. Your authentic self isn't damaged goods waiting to be repaired. It's a complete, whole, powerful essence that's been temporarily obscured by life's circumstances. And the moment you begin to reconnect with this truth, everything changes. Before we go deeper into this transformational process, if this message is already resonating with something deep inside you, if you're sensing that this might be exactly what you've been searching for, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel is dedicated to exploring the profound psychological insights that can genuinely change your life, and every video builds upon these foundational truths. Your future self will thank you for taking this step toward authentic transformation. Now let's explore Jung's revolutionary understanding of why we become disconnected from ourselves in the first place, and more importantly, how we can find our way back. Carl Jung made a startling discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about human psychology. He realized that what we call our personality isn't actually who we are at all. It's what he termed the persona, a mask we create to navigate social expectations and survive in the world around us. The word persona literally comes from the Latin for mask, the theatrical masks worn by actors in ancient Rome to portray different characters. But here's where it gets fascinating. Jung discovered that over time we don't just wear these masks, we actually start to believe we are the mask. We become so identified with our personas that we lose touch with what lies beneath. The successful professional, the perfect parent, the people pleaser, the rebel, the victim, these aren't your true self. They're roles you've learned to play so well that you've forgotten you're acting. This psychological splitting happens gradually, often beginning in childhood, when we first learn that certain parts of ourselves are acceptable while others are not. A naturally creative child might suppress their artistic impulses if they're told repeatedly that art isn't practical. A sensitive child might learn to hide their emotions if vulnerability is met with rejection or ridicule. An adventurous spirit might become cautious and conforming if risk-taking is consistently punished. What Jung discovered is that these suppressed aspects don't simply disappear. They become what he called the shadow, the hidden parts of our psyche that contain not just our perceived negative traits, but also our unrealized potential, our authentic desires, and our true creative power. The shadow isn't evil despite its name. It's simply everything we've decided we're not allowed to be. But there's another aspect of Jung's work that's even more profound, the concept of the self with a capital S. This isn't the ego or the persona or even the conscious mind. The self is what Jung considered to be the totality of who you are, the unified whole that exists beyond all the fragmentations and splits. It's your authentic essence, your true nature, the part of you that remains constant beneath all the changing circumstances of life. Modern neuroscience is now validating what Jung intuited decades ago. Research shows that we literally have different neural networks that activate, depending on which self we're presenting to the world. The brain patterns of someone in their work persona are measurably different from when they're alone and unguarded. This isn't just psychological theory anymore, it's biological fact. The disconnection from our true self creates what Jung called a neurosis, but not in the clinical sense we might think of today. Jung's definition of neurosis was much broader. It's the suffering that comes from living a life that isn't aligned with who you really are. It's the exhaustion of constantly performing, the emptiness that comes from achieving goals that weren't truly yours, the anxiety that arises when you're always monitoring how others perceive you rather than checking in with your own inner compass. This is why so many people experience what we might call a success crisis. They achieve everything they thought they wanted, only to discover that the satisfaction is hollow, temporary, or completely absent. They followed the script they were given, played the role they thought they should play, and found themselves feeling more lost than ever. Jung would say this isn't a failure, it's actually a call from the self, an invitation to return to authenticity. The process of reconnecting with your true self isn't about rejecting all social conventions or abandoning responsibility. It's about distinguishing between what serves your authentic growth and what simply serves to maintain an image. It's about recognizing when you're operating from fear versus when you're operating from your genuine nature. It's about learning to honor both your need to belong in the world and your need to be true to yourself. Jung observed that this disconnection often reaches a crisis point in what he called the second half of life, typically beginning somewhere in the 30s or 40s. This is when many people experience what others might dismiss as a midlife crisis, but Jung saw it as something far more significant, the psyche's natural attempt to course-correct, to realign with authentic purpose and meaning rather than external expectations. But here's what's truly revolutionary about Jung's approach. He discovered that the very act of recognizing these different aspects of yourself, of making the unconscious conscious, begins the healing process immediately. You don't have to wait for perfect circumstances or complete self-knowledge. The moment you start paying attention to the gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be, transformation begins. This awareness creates what Jung called conscious suffering, which is fundamentally different from unconscious suffering. Unconscious suffering is the vague sense that something is wrong, the persistent feeling of emptiness or anxiety without knowing why. Conscious suffering is the temporary discomfort that comes from seeing truth clearly, from recognizing patterns you want to change, from admitting that some of your life choices haven't been truly yours. The beautiful paradox Jung discovered is that conscious suffering is actually the doorway to healing. When you can see clearly what isn't working, you can begin to make conscious choices about what you want to create instead. When you can recognize your personas for what they are, tools rather than identity, you can begin to choose when and how to use them, rather than being unconsciously controlled by them. Understanding this foundation is crucial because it reveals why most approaches to self-improvement fail. They try to fix or optimize the persona rather than reconnecting with the authentic self underneath. They focus on becoming a better version of who you think you should be, rather than discovering who you actually are. Jung's approach is radically different because it starts with the recognition that you don't need to become anything. You need to remember and integrate what was always there. This remembering isn't a mental exercise. It's a full-body, emotional, spiritual recognition of your own completeness. It's the moment when you stop trying to earn your worth and start claiming it. It's when you stop performing your life and start living it. And once this process begins, it creates a momentum that transforms everything. The journey back to your authentic self is what Jung called individuation, and it's perhaps the most important psychological concept ever discovered. But individuation isn't just a fancy term for self-development. It's a specific process with recognizable stages, and understanding these stages can help you navigate your own transformation with greater clarity and confidence. Individuation begins with what Jung called the confrontation with the persona. This is the moment when you start to recognize that the roles you've been playing, while necessary for functioning in society, are not the totality of who you are. This recognition often comes during times of crisis or transition, when the old ways of being no longer seem to fit or satisfy. For some people, this confrontation happens gradually. They might notice increasing restlessness in their career, a growing sense that they're going through the motions rather than living with purpose. They might find themselves questioning beliefs they've held for years, or feeling drawn to experiences that don't fit their established identity. For others, the confrontation is sudden and dramatic, perhaps triggered by loss, illness, relationship changes, or simply reaching a point where maintaining the persona becomes unsustainable. The key insight here is that this discomfort isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that something is trying to emerge. Jung viewed these periods of upheaval as the psyche's natural attempt to break free from limitations that have outlived their usefulness. The part of you that is your authentic self is calling for recognition and integration. Once you begin to see through your personas, the next stage involves what Jung called shadow work. This is perhaps the most challenging but also the most liberating aspect of the individuation process. Shadow work means turning toward the parts of yourself that you've rejected, denied, or hidden away. It means exploring the emotions you've been taught are unacceptable, the desires you've been told are inappropriate, the aspects of your personality that don't fit your carefully constructed image. Here's what makes shadow work so powerful. Jung discovered that the shadow contains not just our perceived negative traits, but also our greatest unrealized potential. The qualities we suppress often include our most creative, spontaneous, and authentic impulses. The child who was told they were too emotional might have buried not just their capacity for drama, but also their deep empathy and intuitive wisdom. The adolescent who was shamed for being too ambitious might have suppressed not just arrogance, but also their natural leadership abilities and vision for the future. Shadow work isn't about acting on every impulse or abandoning all boundaries. It's about understanding and integrating these rejected aspects so they can serve your wholeness rather than undermining it from the unconscious. When shadow elements remain unconscious, they tend to emerge in destructive ways through projection, self-sabotage, or compulsive behaviors. When they're brought into conscious awareness, they become sources of energy, creativity, and authentic personal power. The process of shadow integration often involves what Jung called active imagination, a technique where you engage with these hidden aspects through dialogue, visualization, or creative expression. You might imagine having a conversation with the part of yourself that feels angry, or the part that feels scared, or the part that holds dreams you've been afraid to pursue. This isn't role-playing or fantasy. It's a genuine encounter with aspects of your psyche that have real wisdom to offer. As shadow work progresses, many people experience what Jung called the encounter with the anima or animus. These are the contrasexual aspects of the psyche, the feminine elements in men, and the masculine elements in women. But Jung's understanding of these concepts went far beyond gender stereotypes. The anima and animus represent the capacity for psychological wholeness, the integration of qualities like receptivity and action, intuition and logic, feeling and thinking. In practical terms, this stage of individuation often involves developing aspects of yourself that have been underdeveloped due to cultural conditioning. A person who has spent their life focused primarily on achievement and external success might need to develop their capacity for rest, reflection, and emotional attunement. Someone who has defined themselves primarily through relationships and caregiving might need to develop their capacity for independent action and self-advocacy. This integration process is where Jung's work becomes deeply transformational, because it's not about choosing between different aspects of yourself, it's about finding a way to honor all of them. You don't have to choose between being strong and being sensitive, between being successful and being authentic, between caring for others and caring for yourself. Individuation is about discovering how to be fully yourself in all your complexity and contradictions. The final stage of individuation involves what Jung called the realization of the self. This isn't a permanent state of enlightenment or perfection. It's an ongoing process of living from your authentic center, making choices that align with your true nature rather than your conditioned patterns, and relating to life from a place of wholeness rather than fragmentation. People who have progressed in their individuation process often describe a profound shift in how they experience life. They report feeling more at peace with themselves, less dependent on external validation, more able to handle challenges without losing their center. They describe relationships that are more authentic and fulfilling, work that feels more meaningful, and a general sense that they're finally living their own life rather than the life they thought they should be living. But perhaps most importantly, they describe a quality that Jung called being at home in oneself. This is the opposite of the alienation and disconnection that characterizes modern life. It's a sense of belonging to yourself, of having access to your own wisdom and resources, of trusting your ability to navigate whatever life presents. This doesn't mean life becomes easy or problem-free. It means you have a reliable internal compass for navigating challenges. It means you can face difficulties without losing touch with who you are. It means you can adapt to changing circumstances without abandoning your core values and authentic nature. The individuation process is ongoing throughout life, deepening and evolving as you encounter new challenges and opportunities for growth. But once it begins, it creates a momentum that supports continuous transformation and healing. You develop what Jung called a creative attitude toward life, an ability to meet each situation freshly rather than simply reacting from old patterns. Understanding individuation as a process rather than a destination is crucial because it removes the pressure to achieve some perfect state of self-realization. Instead, it invites you to engage with your own growth as an ongoing adventure, a continuous deepening into authenticity and wholeness. While understanding Jung's theoretical framework is valuable, the real transformation happens when you begin to apply these insights in practical ways. The journey back to your authentic self isn't just an intellectual exercise, it requires specific practices that help you recognize, integrate, and embody your wholeness. These practices don't require years of analysis or complex techniques. They're accessible tools that can begin creating shifts immediately. The first essential practice is what Jung called self-observation without judgment. This means developing the capacity to notice your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors with curiosity rather than criticism. Most people are either completely unconscious of their internal patterns or harshly judgmental about them. But healing requires a middle path, clear seeing combined with compassionate acceptance. Start by paying attention to the different selves that emerge in different situations. Notice how you are when you're alone versus when you're with family, friends, or colleagues. Observe the thoughts that arise when you're successful versus when you're facing challenges. Watch for the moments when you feel most authentic and the moments when you feel like you're performing or hiding. This observation isn't about changing anything initially. It's simply about developing awareness of your own psychological landscape. Jung believed that consciousness itself is healing, that the simple act of seeing clearly begins to dissolve unconscious patterns. As you develop this observational capacity, you'll start to notice subtle shifts happening naturally. The second crucial practice involves what Jung called active imagination, but you might think of it as conscious dialogue with different aspects of yourself. When you notice a strong emotion or reaction, instead of either suppressing it or being overwhelmed by it, you can engage with it as if it were a separate entity with its own wisdom to share. For example, if you find yourself feeling anxious about a decision, you might internally ask, "What is this anxiety trying to tell me?" Then listen for the response, not with your rational mind, but with the same attention you'd give to a friend who was trying to communicate something important. You might discover that the anxiety is actually excitement about new possibilities, or that it's highlighting something important you haven't considered, or that it's connected to an old fear that's no longer relevant to your current situation. This practice helps you develop what Jung called a dialogue with the unconscious. Instead of being controlled by emotions and impulses you don't understand, you begin to engage with them as sources of information and wisdom. Over time, this creates a much more harmonious relationship between your conscious intentions and your unconscious processes. Dream work is another powerful tool that Jung considered essential for individuation. Dreams, according to Jung, are the psyche's natural way of maintaining balance and providing guidance. They offer insights into unconscious patterns and point toward undeveloped potentials. You don't need to become an expert dream analyst to benefit from this wisdom. Begin by simply recording your dreams and looking for recurring themes, symbols, or emotions. Notice when dreams leave you feeling inspired versus disturbed, and explore what these different qualities might be highlighting about your waking life. Often, dreams will present scenarios that help you practice responding differently to challenging situations, or they'll reveal desires and fears that your conscious mind has been avoiding. Jung also emphasized the importance of creative expression as a pathway to authenticity. This doesn't mean you need to become an artist, but rather that you need to find ways to express what wants to emerge from your deeper self. This might involve writing, painting, dancing, singing, gardening, cooking, or any activity that allows you to connect with your spontaneous creative impulses. The key is to engage in creative activities without focusing on the outcome or worrying about whether you're good at them. The value is in the process itself, in the way creative expression bypasses rational control and allows authentic aspects of yourself to emerge. Many people discover surprising things about themselves through creative exploration themes, preferences, and capabilities they never knew they had. Another essential practice involves what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. This means learning to tolerate and eventually integrate conflicting aspects of yourself rather than trying to resolve them through choosing one side or the other. For instance, you might feel torn between wanting security and wanting adventure, between independence and intimacy, between ambition and contentment. Instead of seeing these as problems to solve, Jung would encourage you to hold both sides with equal respect and explore how they might actually serve each other. Perhaps your desire for security provides the foundation that makes authentic adventure possible. Perhaps your need for independence enhances your capacity for genuine intimacy. Perhaps ambition and contentment can coexist when they're both aligned with your authentic values. This practice of holding tension helps you develop what Jung called psychological flexibility, the ability to respond appropriately to different situations rather than being locked into rigid patterns. It also helps you access the wisdom that emerges when apparent opposites are allowed to inform each other. Regular periods of solitude and reflection are also crucial for reconnecting with your authentic self. In our constantly connected, stimulated world, many people never give themselves the space to simply be without external input. But Jung understood that the self can only be heard in stillness, in moments when you're not performing, producing, or consuming. This doesn't necessarily mean formal meditation, though that can be valuable. It means creating regular opportunities to be alone with yourself without agenda. This might involve walking in nature, sitting quietly with a cup of tea, journaling without specific goals, or simply lying down and allowing whatever wants to arise to surface naturally. During these periods of solitude, pay attention to what emerges. Notice the thoughts that arise when you're not trying to think about anything particular. Observe what your body wants to do when it's not following external schedules. Listen for the subtle voice of intuition that often gets drowned out by the noise of daily life. The practice of conscious relationship is also essential for individuation. This means learning to relate to others from your authentic self rather than from your personas. It involves the courage to be vulnerable, to express your true thoughts and feelings, to set boundaries that honor your genuine needs, and to receive others' authenticity without trying to change or fix them. Conscious relationship often reveals where you're still performing rather than being genuine. It shows you which relationships support your authentic self and which ones require you to abandon aspects of who you are. This doesn't necessarily mean ending relationships that feel challenging, but it does mean bringing more awareness to how you show up in different relationships and making conscious choices about what you're willing to compromise and what you're not. Finally, Jung emphasized the importance of finding meaning and purpose that aligns with your authentic nature rather than external expectations. This involves exploring what genuinely matters to you, what activities and causes energize rather than drain you, what kind of contribution you feel called to make in the world. This exploration often reveals that your true purpose is quite different from what you thought it should be. Many people discover that their authentic calling is simpler, more personal, or more creative than the grand achievements they thought they were supposed to pursue. Others find that their true purpose is actually more expansive and ambitious than they believed they were capable of. The key is to trust what emerges from your own inner exploration rather than what others have told you your purpose should be. Jung believed that each person has a unique contribution to make, and that discovering and expressing this uniqueness is both a personal healing and a gift to the world. These practices work together to create what Jung called a creative attitude toward life. Instead of simply reacting to circumstances from old patterns, you begin to respond from your authentic center. Instead of being controlled by unconscious forces, you develop a conscious partnership with all aspects of your psyche. Instead of living a fragmented existence, you begin to experience the wholeness that was always your true nature. The transformation that occurs through reconnecting with your authentic self isn't just personal, it ripples out into every aspect of your life and relationships. When you stop performing and start being genuine, when you cease seeking external validation and begin trusting your inner wisdom, when you integrate your shadow rather than projecting it onto others, the quality of your entire existence shifts in profound ways. One of the most immediate changes people notice is in their relationships. When you're operating from your authentic self, you naturally attract people who appreciate and resonate with who you really are. The relationships that were based on your personas often fade away or transform, while new connections emerge that feel more nourishing and real. This shift in relationships can initially feel unsettling, especially if you've been surrounded by people who were primarily attracted to your mask rather than your essence. But Jung understood this as a natural part of the individuation process. As you become more authentic, your social circle reorganizes itself around truth rather than performance. The relationships that remain and deepen often take on a quality that Jung called psychological intimacy. This goes beyond emotional closeness to include the capacity to see and accept each other's wholeness, including the parts that aren't always easy or comfortable. These relationships become sources of mutual growth rather than just comfort or validation. In your work life, connecting with your authentic self often leads to significant changes in career direction or approach. Many people discover that they've been pursuing success in fields that don't align with their true interests or capabilities. Others find that they can remain in their current profession but approach it from a much more genuine and satisfying perspective. What changes isn't necessarily what you do, but how and why you do it. Work becomes an expression of your authentic values and capabilities rather than just a means of earning approval or meeting external expectations. This shift often leads to both greater satisfaction and, paradoxically, greater external success because authenticity tends to be more effective than performance in the long run. Your relationship with creativity and self-expression also undergoes profound transformation. Many people who believed they weren't creative discover that they simply hadn't found the right outlet for their authentic creative impulses. Others who were creative in prescribed ways find themselves drawn to entirely new forms of expression that feel more personally meaningful. This isn't about becoming an artist in the conventional sense, though some people do discover that calling. It's about finding ways to bring your unique perspective and energy into whatever you're doing. It's about approaching life itself as a creative act rather than a series of obligations to fulfill. The way you handle challenges and difficulties also shifts dramatically. Instead of being overwhelmed by problems or feeling like a victim of circumstances, you develop what Jung called creative adaptation. This means meeting each situation with your full resources rather than just your habitual responses. Challenges begin to feel less like threats and more like opportunities for growth and self-discovery. You develop confidence in your ability to navigate whatever arises, not because life becomes easier, but because you have access to your complete self rather than just the limited resources of your persona. Perhaps most significantly, your relationship with meaning and purpose becomes much more personal and profound. Instead of trying to find your purpose through external achievements or approval, you discover that meaning emerges naturally from living authentically. Your life begins to feel like a genuine expression of who you are, rather than an attempt to become who you think you should be. This shift in the relationship to meaning often resolves what Jung called the neurosis of our time, the sense of emptiness and meaninglessness that characterizes much of modern life. When you're living from your authentic self, life feels inherently meaningful because it's genuinely yours. The healing that occurs through this process is unlike conventional approaches to therapy or self-improvement. Instead of trying to fix what's wrong, you're reclaiming what was always right. Instead of becoming someone new, you're remembering who you've always been. Instead of healing from the outside in, transformation happens from the inside out. Jung discovered that this approach to healing is remarkably effective because it works with the psyche's natural tendency toward wholeness rather than against it. The self, in Jung's understanding, is constantly trying to emerge and express itself. The individuation process simply removes the obstacles that have been preventing this natural unfolding. This doesn't mean the process is always easy or comfortable. Confronting your shadow, dismantling personas that no longer serve you, and learning to trust your authentic impulses can be challenging work, but it's ultimately much less exhausting than maintaining a false self, and infinitely more satisfying than living someone else's life. The courage required for this journey isn't the courage to become someone extraordinary. It's the courage to be ordinary in the most authentic sense, to be exactly who you are without apology or performance. Jung believed this was actually the most radical act possible in a world that constantly encourages conformity and pretense. As you progress in this journey, you begin to experience what Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to create new possibilities by integrating previously opposing elements. This isn't a mystical concept, it's a practical capacity that emerges when you're no longer split against yourself. When your conscious intentions align with your unconscious wisdom, when your personas serve your authentic self rather than hiding it, when your shadow qualities are integrated rather than projected, you gain access to creative solutions and responses that weren't available when you were operating from a fragmented state. This integration creates what might be called psychological sustainability. Instead of burning out from the effort of maintaining false selves, instead of feeling depleted by the constant need for external validation, instead of being exhausted by internal conflict, you begin to experience a kind of renewable energy that comes from living in alignment with your true nature. The healing journey Jung described isn't just about individual transformation. He believed that as more people undertake this work of individuation, it contributes to the healing of collective consciousness. When you stop projecting your shadow onto others, when you cease needing enemies to define yourself against, when you take responsibility for your own completeness rather than expecting others to complete you, you contribute to a more conscious and compassionate world. This is perhaps Jung's most hopeful insight, that individual healing and collective healing are intimately connected. By doing the work of becoming authentic, by integrating your own fragmented aspects, by learning to live from wholeness rather than woundedness, you participate in a larger transformation that extends far beyond your personal life. The journey back to your authentic self is both the most personal work you can do and the most universal. Every person who undertakes this path of individuation discovers that beneath the surface, differences of personality, culture, and circumstance, there's a common human longing for authenticity, wholeness, and meaning. Jung's great gift was showing us that this longing isn't wishful thinking or spiritual fantasy. It's the voice of our deepest nature calling us home to ourselves. And the remarkable truth is that this homecoming is always available in any moment when we choose to stop performing and start being, when we choose truth over safety, when we choose wholeness over fragmentation. The path back to your authentic self isn't a destination you arrive at once and for all. It's a way of living, a commitment to ongoing growth and self-discovery, a willingness to keep choosing authenticity even when it's challenging or inconvenient. But once you begin this journey, once you taste the freedom and peace that comes from being genuinely yourself, there's no turning back. This is Jung's transformational truth. You don't need to become something you're not. You only need to remember and reclaim what you've always been. You don't need to fix yourself. You only need to integrate yourself. You don't need to earn your wholeness. You only need to stop fragmenting it. The authentic self you're seeking isn't hiding somewhere in the future, waiting for you to become worthy enough to claim it. It's here right now, beneath whatever personas you're wearing, beyond whatever roles you're playing, deeper than whatever stories you've been telling yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. Your true self is patient. It has been waiting as long as necessary for you to remember. It's been sending signals through your discontent with superficial success, through your longing for deeper meaning, through your exhaustion with performance and pretense. Every moment of authenticity you've ever experienced, however brief, has been a glimpse of this true self trying to emerge. The invitation is simple, though not always easy. Stop trying to be who you think you should be and start being who you actually are. Stop seeking validation for your personas and start trusting your authentic impulses. Stop running from your shadow and start integrating its wisdom. Stop fragmenting yourself and start choosing wholeness. This choice is available in every moment. You can begin right now, right where you are, with whatever circumstances you're facing. You don't need perfect conditions or complete self-knowledge. You only need the willingness to be real, to be present to your own experience, to listen to the voice of authenticity that speaks beneath all the noise of external expectations. Jung's work shows us that this return to authenticity isn't just personally healing, it's also the foundation for everything else that matters: genuine relationships, meaningful work, creative expression, and the kind of peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. The world needs your authentic self. Not the polished version, not the persona you think is most acceptable, but the real, complex, imperfect, wholly human you. Your unique perspective, your particular gifts, your individual way of being in the world, these aren't accidents or consolation prizes. They're exactly what you're here to contribute. If this exploration has resonated with something deep inside you, if you've recognized yourself in these descriptions of fragmentation and the longing for wholeness, if you feel ready to begin or deepen your own journey toward authenticity, then you're already taking the first step. The recognition itself is the beginning of transformation. Consider subscribing to continue this exploration of depth psychology and authentic living. Share this message with someone who might need to hear it. And most importantly, trust that the path back to your true self is not only possible, but inevitable once you begin. Your authentic self is your birthright, your natural state, your true home. Welcome back.